Hello, in today's video we're going to look at feminism for beliefs in society for the AQA examining board. Today we're going to evaluate the role of religion and what role it plays in terms of the oppression of women, and we're going to discuss modern examples of the relationship between women and religion. So we're really going to delve deep today in terms of understanding mainstream feminist theory and the views on religion. So feminism, like Marxists, feminists believe that religion does not serve the interests of society as a whole, but rather serves the interests of a particular social group. Most feminists argue that that religion tends to be a force preventing change, maintaining the power of the most powerful groups in society, and they see this group as being men rather than the ruling class. So they view religion as patriarchal, male-dominated, and serving the interests of men. So they expect it to be wholly one-sided in terms of how it really enforces and creates and molds society. So really, just to clarify there, Marxism and feminism is different. Marxism sees religion as an oppressive force due to its relationship with capitalism, whilst feminists see religion as an oppressive force due to its relationship or creation of a patriarchal society, so only serving the best interest of men. Now, according to Kirby et al., feminists are interested in the way religion is used as a source of social opium to control women. So if we throw our minds back to Marxism, obviously he refers to religion as the opium of the masses, which numbs the pain of the oppression, which obviously for Kirby et al., this is an important thing to really draw our attention to. Religion dulls the pain of the oppression that women feel as a result due to religious ideologies. Now, the church service can also illustrate how deep-rooted the masculine nature of the church is, using male pronouns, command words, for women to take a subservient role. Part of the reason being why that there is a real focus in terms of male-dominated pronouns and explanations of church services is because men tend to be more the power holders in religious organisations. So if we look at the Catholic Church, the Pope is always a male, which obviously, if we're going to take it from a feminist perspective, he is going to ensure that he reinforces that patriarchal society and men stay within the dominant role, while women stay within the subsidiary role in terms of religious worship, so that patriarchal society can maintain that oppression as a result. Now, before we really get too deep into the modern understanding of religion, we're going to look at a historical analysis of religion. So we've got historically here, Anderson and Gordon showed how witch hunting had an ideological basis where it reflected the low status of women, witches were invariably identified as being feminine, evil, and antichrist in nature. So seemingly through Anderson and Gordon's analysis here, we can really see how they enforced the patriarchal society by ensuring that women were seemingly, due to their femininity, seen as an evil and untrustworthy as a result. Meanwhile, Power 1975 states that the view of women as an instrument of the devil, a thing at once inferior and evil, took shape in the earliest period of the church history. This is indeed originated by the church. So the view of women are always seen as the instruments of the devil. So the fact of the matter here, it is women who are weak and men that are powerful, and that is why they cannot and should not be main power brokers within religious organisations, because they are weaker, so therefore they can be dominated by evil forces. So realistically, in historical organisations, this is why women are seemingly less desirable or more likely to be oppressed than what men are. All of these views are obviously really representing the feminist point of views, because they're really emphasising that, okay, women are seen as evil and undesirable, so therefore it's the benefit of men to ensure that they are the oppressed group, to ensure that righteousness prevails. So from a feminist perspective, they are reinforcing and creating that patriarchal society as a result. Now, we can see this in terms of some of our religions here, and we're going to look at some examples right now. Now, female deities are found in all religions throughout the world. In some, they take on the motherly caring role. So, Mary, the Mother of God. Feminists argue that the Catholic Church has allowed Mary to epitomise women's roles, leading a life of submission to God and an unhelpful role model to young girls as a result. Because Mary was subservient, she followed the rules of what the men gave to her. So she was really absorbing and not at all fighting against the oppressive patriarchal force that religion has forced upon her, ensuring that she's following that submissive role. Obviously, as a role model for young girls, she is now saying, okay, submit and be a good follower of that religion. Do not rebel against that mainstream male ideology which is telling you how and why you should be acting in that manner. Now, Erickson in 1982 gives a critical reading of the work of Durkheim and Weber on religion. A central aspect of her work is an investigation of the sacred and profane dualism. So obviously, if we can recall what sacred profane means, so sacred, objects which are held in high revere and respected, being profane, objects of everyday nature, in which the sacred is always gendered as masculine. So the objects that should be held in awe and respected the whole time are masculine in the way that they are described. Meanwhile, profane objects are considered to be feminism. Now, such notions are seen to be biased in nature and creating that sexual bias as a result. So, in terms of sociology of religion, this is seeing that the patriarchal society is truly being reinforced here because individuals are now saying, okay, sacred objects are male, so therefore when we think about female objects, they are not sacred. So they do not need to be respected in the same way in which men need to be respected, therefore reinforcing that patriarchal society as a result. Now, Karen Armstrong in 1993 argues that religion has not always been a patriarchal system. She claims that in early history women were considered central to spirituality, and archaeologists have found numerous symbols of the Great Mother Goddess. In comparison, there were fewer portrayals of male gods. So therefore, women once did actually have a central role to religion, and it wasn't a subservient role, it was more of a power breaker role. And now we're going to really look at an example here that we'll understand a bit deeper. Now, the example that we've got here is as follows. So, in 750 BC in Babylon, the importance of the goddess declined as male god Marduk, which as you can see here, and replaced the female goddess Tiamat at the dominant figure in religion. With the advent of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, monotheistic religions, which believed in one god rather than many, largely replaced the polytheistic religions, which obviously believed in multiple gods. In all these cases, God was portrayed as male. So therefore, we could see that the Tiamat, the female goddess, then declined. She no longer existed as a result, and she was replaced by this male god representation. Obviously, for Armstrong here, women we can see played a central role within the example of this Babylonian example. However, as these monotheistic religions started to emerge, women lost that centrality to their power. They then became oppressed by these monotheistic religions as male gods became more dominant as a result. And as mentioned, here is the example. So I'll give you a few seconds just in case you want to click pause. Now, we know there is gender inequality in some of the major religions in the world. Women are still seemingly put into subservient roles, and if they were ever to take some of the main roles, they would be seen as abnormal or problematic in their approach. So, women continue to be excluded from many of the key roles in many religions, although in some religions, such as the Church of England, women are now allowed to become priests from 1992, and therefore allow them to become some of the main power brokers. However, they are still suffering from some stigma by trying to pursue this career. This is despite the fact that women often participate more than men in organised religion. Now, Jean Home in 1994 really pushes the idea further. Now, she argues that in the public sphere of religion, where important positions are held and public pronouncements are made, men are always dominant. Obviously, we know that the Church of England has done the rechange that and allowed women to become more predominant within the public sphere. However, men are still largely priests. However, in the private sphere, for example, the socialization of children into religion within families, women are dominant and do more of the religious work. Holm has identified inequalities between men and women in all major religions. And so, therefore, we can see here that, okay, men are within those public power positions, which therefore means that they can create and mould the roles in which women should be doing within the household. Therefore, maintaining that patriarchal society and ensuring that they stay within their places. Now, here are the inequalities identified by Holm in major religions. So we've got 6 examples here which we're really going to delve deep into. Now, the first one here is God is portrayed as male and as a father figure. Jesus and all his disciples are male, and the Bible is entirely written by men. Only men can become priests, and the Pope is therefore male. In the Bible, Eve is portrayed as being created out of Adam's spare rib, which is obviously a Christian/Catholic viewpoint here. Now, obviously, women are therefore they need to be deserving and be appreciative towards men because they are created out of the main masculine figure in the Bible, which is Adam. So therefore, women are always second to masculine or male identities because men came first, women came second. So therefore, that is the role in which they should be playing within religion and within the household as well. So from that view of that religious doctrine, we can immediately see the patriarchal society emerging as a result. Meanwhile, in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad was male. Men take all legal judgments and are religious leaders. We are going to deal with Islam a little bit later on as well, and I'm not going to delve too deep into it right now. Then we've got Hinduism. Only men can become Brahmin priests. So as we know here, that is the top of the caste system there. Women cannot approach family shrines when pregnant or menstruating. So therefore, as a result, due to their biology, they are immediately put as the second sex. They're immediately seemingly put into this role where they cannot participate fully within the religion due to biological differences between men and women. Now we've got Chinese folk religions here. Women are associated with yin and men with yang spirits, but yang spirits are more important and powerful as a result. So again, we can see that separation of the two again. Women therefore are more subservient as a result because they've got the yin spirits, because they do not have the same power and importance that the yang spirits promote within the Chinese folk religions. Then we've got Orthodox Judaism. Only women play a full part only men play full parts in religious ceremonies and become rabbis. Women are seemingly more crucial at home worship. In terms of Orthodox Judaism, men and women often are separated, and there are stricter rules and regulations which Orthodox women have to follow. So often they may have to wear, if they are single, actually when they're married as well, may have to wear a wig which covers their hair, which only their husbands can see. So therefore, they've got these extra oppressive forces, very similar to Islam, where they have to veil themselves to an extent. Then we've got Sikhism here, the most equal of the major religions since all positions are equally open to men and women. However, in practice, most senior positions are still held by men. So even though, yes, women can get involved and really take part in most of the positions, most of the mainstream and most important roles are dominated by men. So therefore you'll see that the ideology of that religion is probably still stacked in favour of male domination, which therefore, as a result, all 6 of these are really, really hammering home and forcing down the viewpoint that the patriarchal society does exist, because women throughout all of these religions are actually still seemingly seen as the second sex or the second unequal gender. Now, Holm really notes that the woman's second-class status is often related to female biology and sexuality. So, realistically, the reason why they are that second-class status is because of their biology and the fact of their sexuality, their dominance within these realms. So, as we've seen with earlier examples there, if women are menstruating or they're pregnant in Hinduism, they cannot approach the family shrines. Whilst if in Islam they are menstruating, they are not permitted to touch the Quran. So therefore, we can see that women are then put into these subservient roles, put into these different category than male worshippers, because men have got access to religion and therefore the doctrine the whole time, whilst women are limited as a result. Now, Armstrong in 1993 argues that the lowest status of women is associated with the development of monotheism, so the worship of one god over over many gods in terms of polytheistic religions. As we've already identified with previous viewpoints there, this is why then that these male gods have taken over and really pushed the female goddesses to a side. Therefore, this in itself is really reiterating and enforcing the idea as to why women are that second class status, because they no longer hold any powerful relationships in terms of religious figures at all. Now, the next person we're going to look at is Simone de Beauvoir here, who had written a book called The Second Sex. Now, she takes on a varying view as to the role of religion and patriarchy. Now, de Beauvoir in 1949 sees religion as an instrument of male domination. It is important to note that de Beauvoir is usually considered to be a radical feminist. Her views have similarities with Marxism because she believes that this religion is primarily used as a force of oppression. Now, what de Beauvoir in 1949 really recognises is men usually control religious organisations and claim that their authority comes from God. So, for example, kings used to rule by divine right. When we talk about divine right, it was their birthright given by God to be rulers, and therefore it should not be questioned about reasons why or how they make their decisions, because God has preordained them with that particular responsibility, and it would always generally be male dominated as a result. Now, religion gives women a false belief that their suffering will be rewarded in heaven. It deceives women into thinking that they are equal to men, whilst in reality they are disadvantaged as the second sex. Now, when talking about de Beauvoir here, it's important that you utilise this particular key word or key term, which is the second sex, because women are the second sex in this sense. The religion is used to reinforce that oppression, whilst also giving them this idea of false consciousness that they are, in theory here, going to be rewarded in the afterlife. As we can see with Marxism, this is obviously promoted through the use of scripture. So the Beatitudes, in terms of de Beauvoir, would read it as, okay, Beatitudes really are enforcing the idea here that women are going to be rewarded in heaven, because blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, the meek in this case would be women, so they will inherit the earth, and therefore they will gain the power and they will be granted access to heaven because they've been good, subservient within this lifestyle. Now, de Beauvoir really continues this idea further for us. So some religions portray women as being closer to God, but only if they are passive and do not question male authority. Religion therefore gives women a form of false consciousness which keeps them in their place. So therefore makes them less willing as a result to try create any form of social change. Submit and behave, and therefore you will be rewarded in the afterlife. This in itself is reason why the patriarchal society can be maintained as a result. Now we have NAWAL al-SAADAWI here in 1980. I'm going to link her back to de Beauvoir in a second, but I thought it's best that we have a good understanding of her writings first. So, in her book, The Hidden Face of Eve in 1980, she discussed female oppression in the Arab world and elsewhere and considered the importance of religion in creating and perpetrating oppression. Now, she looked at this through the different practices that were conducted within societies, particularly within Islam. Now, she noted that oppressive practices such as female circumcision have been attributed to the influence of Islam. However, al-Sadawi denies that the oppression of women is directly caused by religion in general or Islam in particular. Female circumcision has been practiced in a considerable number of countries, not all of them Islamic. Now, really to illustrate this point here in terms of this barbaric practice that al-Sadawi is recognising, is that female genital mutilation is still happening to this day. Female circumcision is where parts of the clitoris is removed. It's barbaric and obviously it is scarring for women. And in terms of this practice, it is male-dominated ritual. So they are doing this to enforce their oppressive forces over the women. As you can see here, in terms of the female genital mutilation and, in other words, female circumcision, anything with the red on it are countries where there are percentages above 80%. So this still happens as a mainstream practice within those countries. Whilst if you look at the orange countries, that's 51 to 80%. So this barbaric practice is still going on quite largely within some of the African states. So in terms of this, and we look at it and read it from al-Sadawi's point of view here, this in terms of it is the Islamic men really maintaining traditional viewpoints, and by exploiting these barbaric practices, they are in turn oppressing women and reinforcing that patriarchal society as a result. Now, al-Sadawi argues that religion started to become patriarchal through the misinterpretation of religious beliefs by men. So, as monotheistic religions believing in a single God became more dominant, such religions drew inspiration and guidance from the values of patriarchal and class societies relevant at that time. So, drawing on the experiences and the information that is currently accessed during that time, they can then say, okay, this is what we need to base our societies on. Now, linking al-Sadawi to de Beauvoir, she accepts that women are exploited through religion, for example, with the use of female genital mutilation or female circumcision. However, al-Sadawi believes that it is not religion itself which is to blame, because Islam does not actually support practices which oppress women. The real problem is the manipulation and misinterpretation of religious teachings by men for their own benefit. So it is in fact that the reason the manipulation of those scriptures and readings is why that patriarchal society has emerged as a result. Now, sociologists have come to acknowledge that women cannot always be seen as passive victims of religious oppression, and that religious practices are sometimes open to interpretation. So Badawi in 1984 notes that aspects of Islam are positive for women. For example, Islamic women keep their own family name when they are married. So in theory here, they still maintain some form of power and choice in terms of marriage and their choice as to whether or not they accept or keep their last name, which obviously maintains that link with their family. So really, it's thrown back into al-Sadawi's ideas here that actually men are not manipulating it, and men do not control everything in terms of this, as recognised by Simone de Beauvoir and al-Sadawi. Instead, women can still have some power in terms of choosing whether or not they change their last name, which means obviously they could relinquish their last and final links with their biological families. Now, Watson really investigates this further in terms of Islamic beliefs. So, Watson examines the veiling of Islamic women. This practice is seen by many non-Muslim writers as a form of social control, because this is putting women in this position where they have to be hidden and they have to be veiled in order to be protected. In this sense here, it's exerting that control because men are going and saying, you have to be veiled because you are my property and no one else can see you. However, Watson argues that veiling can have its advantages for women in that it can reduce or allow them to cope with male oppression more. So really, this is a choice that women might take to really try and reduce that anxiety which may come about due to that male oppression. So, for example, here, it reduces the possibility of sexual harassment and allows Muslim women to be judged for who they are rather than for what they look like. And as a turn there, it's preventing the impacts of the male gaze in the patriarchal societies, and it's preventing women of becoming these further victims of harassment as a result. However, despite having some power in religion, especially within Islamic states, women are still seemingly the oppressed groups within that society. As we saw in lesson here, this is a fantastic TED talk by which this lady talks and discusses about how she wasn't allowed to drive a car due to Saudi law. And this, therefore, and by her breaking this, she became a ostracized figure within that community. And this in itself became a source of great conflict within her society because she was violating and going against that mainstream male dominant ideology. And because she is the second class sex, or the second sex as de Beauvoir might call it, and she should have stuck to those roles which are preordained and pre-designated to her according to Islamic rule. Now, HOLM in 1994 notes that Quakerism is one religion that has always been relatively equal between men and women. HOLM also argues that women are starting to resist patriarchal religion and gain some rights, so that religion is not as male dominated as it once was. Wright in 1994 notes that the reform of Judaism allows for women to become rabbis. So therefore, as we discussed earlier, in terms of enforcing oppression, women now becoming part of one of the main power brokers, therefore allows the oppressive forces of the patriarchal society to be undone. However, as we know with the Church of England reform, men are still dominantly the power brokers, whilst women, our priests in particular, are still in the minority as a result. Now we're going to go into the evaluation here. So the main point that we can probably pick up straight away is that Marxists see religion as an instrument of class oppression rather than an instrument of patriarchy. So they see that the fact of it's the bourgeoisie controlling the proletariat, so the underclass, rather than it being a gender division or sex division created, and the oppression is based off of that. Whilst functionalists argue that religion is a force creating value consensus which is beneficial to society rather than being an oppressive force to women. So again, feminism is only acknowledging the negative points that religion is creating, rather than acknowledging the good points that religion is really forcing for us. So demonstrating that religion can have a benefit for society as a result. Now, some feminists, such as de Beauvoir, generalise about religion and always being oppressive and ignores the differences between religions and the fact that, okay, some religions can be seemingly more equal. So our example here is the one that identified by HOLM in 1984, Quakerism. So the ideas that we've got from Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and all those ones, and where de Beauvoir has identified how they are used as an oppressive force, is generalised to these other religions, such as Quakerism as well, which is seemingly more equal than other religions. Now, feminists focus on one aspect of religion at the expense of all others, so potentially the public sphere, so who preaches in the church. So this would be some of the main focus for some of the feminists, and they would ignore the fact that actually, do you know what? Yes, we might not be preaching, but they do other features within the church community, which potentially could make them greater power brokers. Now, most religions do still give more power to men, as we know, but women are seemingly gaining more and more power through the reformation of some of the acts and policies within these religious organisations. Now, this is it for feminism. If you have got any questions, let me know.